Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. You might think it would be considered suspicious enough if law enforcement found two bodies of murdered children in your backyard. But law enforcement says it wasn't just that made them suspicious of Chad Daybell, that when they were finding the bodies, some of the things he did made them extra suspicious. And we have to face it, they were already suspicious enough that as soon as he tried to leave, they put him in handcuffs and plopped him in the back of a police car. But they say he was also acting in a way that made them really suspicious. He was acting sketchy. And so we're going to talk about what they say he did and why they were suspicious tonight. We will, of course, as always, also explain why his side thinks what he was doing was not suspicious. So we'll cover both sides. So welcome in off the commercials, everybody. We are in the middle of a huge boon for legal cases because simultaneously, Chad Daybell's trial is going forward in Idaho, and Karen Reed's trial starts tomorrow, both of them being televised. So that is absolutely huge news. I told you it's my hope to try to cover both. Had a little bit of a kink in the works on that, which is my hubby, George, has been admitted to the hospital again. So, and he's, pretty sick. I don't like to leave him alone. So I'm over there all day and then come home and talk to y'all at night. And so I'll be working, from the hospital, trying to go live at night. I don't know for sure I'll be able to do every night. Hopefully, he's got a great antibiotic and he's going to feel better really soon. So that's what we're going to hope for, and everything will be fine. But I did want to let you know, in case there are some changes, I'll post it as soon as I know on the community page if I have to miss anything or I won't be able to go live. So the plan is to go live every night at 7 p.m. Eastern, not just our usual times of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So I do want to, before we dive into Chad and the sketchy behavior, I want to talk about one thing that happened at the beginning of the day that was extremely important. And I wanted to kind of go over what it was. Apparently, over the weekend, John Pryor, who is Chad's lawyer, Chad Daybell's lawyer, sent the court and the prosecution an email asking the judge to reconsider the ruling that Chad is not allowed to get into the issue of Joseph Ryan's death. Now, Joseph Ryan, who is Joseph Ryan? Well, he's Lori Daybell's third husband. One of the most terrifying parts of the case is the trail of destruction that Lori Daybell left in her wake. In 2007, her third husband, Joseph Ryan, was assaulted by her brother, Alex Cox, and Alex actually went to jail for that. Then Alex Cox, with Lori at least present in the house, shot and killed Lori Vallow Daybell's fourth husband, Charles Vallow. So that freed her up to consort with Chad Daybell. I should say, from her side, it freed her up because there was still the technical problem of Chad's 29-year marriage to Tammy Daybell, his wife. But that did turn out to be a short-term problem since Tammy Daybell died shortly after this, and that is one of the three murders Chad Daybell is charged with, the murder of his own wife, Tammy Daybell. So Chad apparently intends to argue, and we're a little vague on this still at this early stage of the case. He intends to argue that he was afraid of Alex Cox, or maybe that Alex Cox was the primary evildoer. We aren't exactly sure where Chad is headed with this, but one of the things he referred to without detail was the death of Joseph Ryan. And the state says, that's too long ago and it's not connected. The third husband isn't the fourth and isn't Chad and isn't any of the three people who were murdered. So it's too long ago. It's not directly connected. And Chad says, look, this is a pattern. This is how Lori and Alex operated. They were a team who conspired together to get all of her husbands, and they're scary people, and Chad was entirely innocent. He was ensnared by this scary duo of Lori and her brother Alex. The judge ruled that any reference to the assault on The third husband, Joseph Ryan, is out. I personally, probably speaking personally, I probably would have let it in because it's a death penalty case. And so I think that, and it's arguably related, but I don't see this as grounds for reversal because I think the judge's decision was very rational. The assault was 12 years before the death of Charles Vallow. It was not clearly connected. And yes, I do know that Joseph Ryan then died later, but also that was ruled to be natural causes. So all of that is out, but it was an important ruling. Now, one other note before we dive into the sketchy behavior, one of the things the judge is doing is asking the jury to sign something saying that they did not do any research over the weekend, didn't watch coverage and see what was happening in the trial or what commentators were saying. I thought that was a really good idea. I was impressed by that. So, okay, and now for the sketchy behavior. So the prosecution says that Chad did several things that were pretty suspicious that suggested that he knew and participated in the murders of JJ and Tylee, and that his wife didn't just die, that she was murdered. So let's start with the places where they say Chad's behavior suggested that he knew about the murders of JJ and Tylee, the children of his lover at the time, later wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. So I want to set the scene for you. I'm going to play a phone call between Lori and Chad, but let's talk about the scene. So law enforcement arrives at Chad's house at 7 a.m. on the morning of June 9th. More than 30 officers from Fremont County, Rexburg Police, and the FBI are on his property, crawling all over it. Cadaver dogs are there. They are scouring Chad's backyard, looking for the remains of JJ, age 7, Tylee, age 17. Chad Daybell is sitting in his car watching all of this unfold. He came out of his house, was in his car, sitting there watching. And law enforcement is about to actually find the remains of JJ and Tylee right there in his backyard, what he refers to as a field, but nonetheless, behind his house, whatever you call it. So, and they are even going to find JJ buried in the same red pajamas that he was last pictured in. So while Chad is sitting there in his car, Lori calls him. Lori, meanwhile, is in jail. She has been ordered to produce her children to show that they're alive and well. She didn't. She didn't come to court. She didn't produce them for the now completely obvious reason that they, in fact, were not alive and well. So she could not produce them. So they now talk in jail. And here's how that conversation went.
A call from and paid for by
Lori.
an inmate at Madison County Jail. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. If you don't wish to talk, hang up now. Thank you for using Telmate.
Hi, babe.
Hello.
Are you okay?
Oh, they're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm at Emma's. Mark means we'll be talking to you.
That's an attorney.
Okay. What, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Way
Are
worse.
they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant, and so moment I just at Emma's with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to set up a call. I'm glad you called.
Yeah.
And we'll see what transpires.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
What do you want me to do? Pray.
What?
What do you want me
Yeah,
to
pray. Pray. Yeah.
Okay. What can I do for you?
I'm feeling pretty calm. I would call Mark, though, maybe. And just talk with him.
Have you talked to him already?
I did call him, yes.
So he knows what they're doing?
Yeah. It's like a call from somebody else I need to talk to. I love you so much.
Okay, I love you. Should I try to call you later?
I don't know. I don't know. You can try, yeah. I'll answer if I can.
Okay.
I love you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, baby. I love you.
Okay. Love you. Goodbye.
Okay, I saw somebody saying, what is he on Xanax or something? Honestly, I don't know, innocent or guilty. How could anyone be that calm in this situation? It is astonishing to me. But the prosecution's point is this about the phone conversation between Chad and Lori. They say Chad knows that they are about to find the bodies of 2 children in his backyard. The gig is up. The game is over. When Lori asks what to do, the only 2 things that they can come up with, it's not even Chad, it's Lori, are prayer and talking to a lawyer, because that's all that's left. He does sound so, I don't know, is it despondent, relaxed, something in this? I wonder, does he always sound that way? Because he does look pretty calm. He doesn't look like an emotional person, but it is astonishing. So the second thing that the law enforcement talked about that made them suspicious, there was this phone conversation with Lori that happened while this search is going on. And it was found just right there in the phone files in the prison. And neither of them confessed, of course, but law enforcement found it suspicious. And for the reasons I said, they also thought it was suspicious that he kept craning his neck, they said, looking at the exact spot where Tylee's body was buried. It was so obvious, they said, that the police remarked on it, that must be an important area. We should be sure to look there or keep digging there. Detective Wheeler, a Rexburg police detective, said that Chad looked many times just kind of awkwardly right where they were working by the pond, that it was a long time. At one point, he even got out of the car, walked to the rear, and looked at that area. That focus on the areas where they were exactly finding something concerned them and made them think that he was guilty. Then the third thing that he did that they considered sketchy was that just as they were finding JJ's body, he suddenly drove off, and they said fast, not just a slow pull out. Like, he drove off out of there, peeled out of there. And you'll hear his response to that in just a minute. And then the fourth thing was that after he was cuffed and put in the back of the police car, he talked through the open door to his daughter, Emma. And he told her all about the finances and how to access things, the password. They made arrangements for her to move into his house. All these just details. And she said to him, "It sounds like you're not going to be out for a little while." And he said, "I'm not coming back." So all of that, and he told her to put his and Lori's stuff in the garage. So it won't surprise you that the defense thinks none of this is sketchy behavior, but law enforcement found all of it to be really of concern, that all of these things raised their suspicion level. Now, as I said, they were already suspicious. They already, immediately when he tried to leave, put him in handcuffs, put him in the back of the truck. They said, "You're not being arrested, but we just don't want you to leave the premises while we figure out what's going on and what's happening." So in return, on the opposite side of the coin, the cross-examination, here is what they said about these arguments. They said, look, it was 7 a.m. They knocked on the guy's door and 30 officers and cadaver dogs began roaming around his backyard. Who would not be a little nervous? And I can answer that. Chad Daybell, apparently. I've never seen anyone less nervous. It was crazy. But they said, who would not be watching it like a hawk and wondering what was happening? So all that looking at what they were doing, what was unusual about that? That's exactly what you would do, the defense argued. They also pointed out that Chad Daybell hung out for 4 hours, first in his driveway, and then catty-cornered across the street at his daughter's house. And I had a question for you. The word, what I say catty-cornered, I know some people say kitty-cornered, and they're different things that people say. I'm really curious. Would you put the place where you're from and what you use for that word? And the word I'm talking about is, it's the house, not your house directly across the street, neighbor, and not the one next door to you, but the one right there on that side. What do you call that? If you would tell me, I'm really curious about that. And then Chad's team also said, you know, if he's hanging out for 4 solid hours, it isn't like he ran right off. And for that matter, they said, he wasn't even in custody. He was free to go. So what if he drove off? What was suspicious about somebody not in custody driving to see his lawyer? That's entirely legal behavior. The fourth thing they said is that he had no idea that JJ's body had been found until after the police caught up to him as he headed out and told him. Now, let me play just a little bit more of the cross-examination and then we'll start talking.
You don't know the circumstances or the reason for why Mr. Daybell left his daughter's home kitty corner from the house and drove off, do you?
I'm not aware why he drove off.
So to suggest that the fact that they found a body on his property and that was the reason for him driving off, you don't know what the reason Mr. Daybell drove off. There's another reason, or it could be another reason. Would that be fair?
There could be another reason, yes.
Right. All right.
Before I play this, Detective Wheeler, you see on screen.
Let me go ahead and pull that out. And I think we're probably going to do the rest of it tomorrow or Wednesday, whichever day we get to it. So the defense team went on to say, the defense team, it's really just John Pryor. John Pryor went on to say, look, when he was arrested, he was compliant. He did stop. It isn't like he went running off, as if he could have anyway with that many people right there. When he talked to his daughter, she tells him they've told her they found a body. And she says, I can tell by your expression that you didn't know what was going on out there. So that's another thing they pointed to. They also pointed to the fact that at the time he was supposedly speeding away, he was entering a road that was a 50-mile-per-hour road. They said, well, maybe that's normal to drive quickly as you're entering a road where the speed limit is so different from stop to 50 miles an hour. And at one point, they pointed out he moved the car, and at his new point, he actually had a worse view of the areas that they were going to find the body. So why would he have done that if he knew that was the scene? And then, so those are the kinds of arguments that they made. Now, I also want to talk about, that's what they were saying. That is the set of arguments around the deaths of JJ and Tylee. But I also want to talk about what the prosecution found suspicious about his reaction to Tammy Daybell's death, his wife's death. The initial, and this is something that has to be overcome by the prosecution, because the initial autopsy said that the cause of death for Tammy was a cardiac event and pulmonary edema. It was natural causes, in other words. Her father had had a history of heart issues. So Chad told the police that she had a coughing fit, that she vomited, and then she went to sleep, and he discovered she was dead later. Now, Chad also told police she didn't have any serious medical conditions. She'd been sick, but she had been sick. She had been going through menopause. That's what he told them. So the Lieutenant Joseph Powell, a 22-year detective with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, talked about having finding out and looking again into the death of Tammy Daybell, initially considered completely natural causes. The way it happened, Gilbert, Arizona gave them a call asking about Tammy Daybell's death. They wanted the report, and they asked Fremont County, could they please find a gray Jeep Wrangler that was suspected of having been involved in a shooting in Arizona, a shooting of Lori's nephew-in-law, Brandon Boudreaux. So sure enough, law enforcement went to one of the addresses. It took several different addresses, but to 565 Pioneer Road, and they did surveillance on Lori and Chad. They never did locate the Jeep, they said, but Chad and Lori came and went. They saw them holding hands going into Hobby Lobby and eating together at a restaurant, Cafe Rio, on November 1st. Now, this was less than a month after Tammy Daybell had died. Suddenly, things seemed far more suspicious. And Chad told police that Tammy didn't go to the doctor very often. They found out she was on tramadol and fluoxetine. She was on fluoxetine for depression. They got her medical records, which showed that the only thing she was being seen for was depression and anemia. So they decided they would exhume the body, which Chad did not want to happen. That's what they considered. He wanted her buried very quickly, no real examination, and then he did not want her body exhumed. So one of the things that people pointed out in the comments today as I was watching was that when they showed an autopsy photo of Tammy, there didn't seem to be any sort of noticeable reaction from Chad. But then I will say this, I haven't really seen much noticeable reaction from Chad at all. I assume that's just how he is. He's very placid. He doesn't react a lot. So, but they considered it suspicious that he didn't want that. Here was and also just the whole situation with Tammy Daybell and Chad saying she had no medical troubles. She did have depression and anemia. John Pryor, his lawyer, countered this by saying she had been using herbal treatments instead of going to the doctor. She had essential oil. She had natural medicines in the cabinet. So although it might look like she didn't have medical problems, she really did. Law enforcement's thinking if she didn't have medical problems, what makes her suddenly die at a relatively young age in the middle of the night? Why would that happen? But Chad Daybell's side is saying she did have problems. She was trying to treat them with herbal remedies, with supplements. She was just not going to the doctor. And that's why you don't see them on the medical records. She had bruises and was taking medication for bruises. Her son, Chad, said his mom was having seizures. Her daughter said she was taking clogging at one point, but then just couldn't keep going and started slowing down. So the officer agreed with John Pryor, Chad's lawyer, that he had not taken those particular comments into account. So all of those things put together are what Chad argues about why it isn't suspicious that he didn't want Tammy exhumed and why he thinks that Tammy's death was truly of natural causes. So I thought today and go ahead and if you've got questions, go ahead and start putting those in the comments, and then I'll get to those in just a minute. Oh, we've got so many gifted memberships. Thank you so much, Pamela. I really appreciate that. And I'm very glad to hear Hope 8 Fear has become a YouTube member. Good. Thank you. And also gifted 5 lawyerly memberships. Boy, that was quick. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Robert Bates. Thank you. Robert is always very generous. I appreciate your support of the channel, Robert. I thought today we did get a little clue that maybe Chad will not testify. And here's why I thought that, because his lawyer went into a fair amount of detail about how Chad was driving off to see his lawyer. But the state objected, and it was sustained, which certainly made sense because the lawyer can't testify about Chad was going to see his lawyer. Chad has to get up on the stand and say he was going to see his lawyer. Or maybe the lawyer gets up on the stand and says at 2 o'clock, I had an appointment with Chad. He didn't show, he was in prison, or in jail. So if Chad was planning to testify, I would think there wasn't a need for John Pryor to try so hard to get that information in. he did get that in somewhat in that Chad said something to the detective. You can't hear it on the body cam. And then the detective tells Chad, well, your attorney is just going to have to come see you in jail now. And John Pryor said that clearly shows that what's happening is Chad has just said, I'm on my way to see my lawyer. And he says, well, he's going to have to come see you in jail now because that's where you're headed. So that was their argument. Okay, let me head down and get to the questions. I should have done that a little faster because now I may have missed some. Okay. Hopefully I've got it about right. All right. Hey, Mona wants to know, as an attorney, what's your take on Pryor's tone on cross? It seems to me that the jury can be turned off by his manner. I do know what you're talking about because sometimes he sounds a little, sort of, what's mocking almost like, oh, so now you admit it. And I understand your point. I still think just given the entire totality of the circumstances that he's doing a great job. I really do believe that based on how difficult this case is, and he's doing it all by himself. So I continue to think that. He's also had many, many objections sustained today. So to me, it wasn't too many because they were being sustained. Annie has a question. Oops, I didn't mean to throw that up, Annie. Chad's flat demeanor seems like an affectation, contrived, image obsessed. Thoughts? You know, this is my view, Annie, and I can see it going either way. I do not see how you could affect that. It seems to me like that has to be entirely part of who you are. I don't see any way you could do that if that weren't just baked into your DNA and who you are. Just a thought. Okay, I totally forgot to say question marks at the beginning. Please do put your question marks at the beginning, and that'll help me spot them. And if you didn't, I'll try to look for them for a while. Oh, Marlon telling everybody in the chat. Thank you, Marlon. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Susan. I appreciate the super sticker very much. Okay, I'm still looking for my questions. Well, my goodness, I didn't have many questions. So here we go. Lisa wants to know, do you think Emma knows what's been happening or involved somehow? There's clearly, and we'll probably cover this on the next video I do on this case, which I'm not sure if that'll be tomorrow or Wednesday. I don't know if I'll do Karen Reed tomorrow and then vice versa. Anyway, so there were some comments that were made in the way she handled talking to her dad through the door of the car. So he's sitting in the police car in cuffs, and she's right there at the door. The door is open, and they let her talk to him. And she tells him how much she loves him. He says the same, and he tries to sort of handle dad-like some of the things that need to be handled, like finances and everything. She says, they told me that they found a body and they found it underneath some boards. And maybe she's placid like he is, but she doesn't seem particularly alarmed by that. It seems like that would be stunning, shocking news. And she doesn't seem shocked by it. But I just don't know enough about them. Maybe they're all very calm like that. And maybe that's just how they are. I have no reason to think Emma knows anything. So that would be my guess is no, that she doesn't. But I understand why people wondered based on that conversation. Sarah Boo, what does it mean when the attorneys keep saying that the evidence is stipulated? Good question, Sarah Boo. And what it means is that they've agreed in advance that to something. For example, let's say there's a document, they'll stipulate to the document being admissible. They'll agree together that the document is admissible and it can be just used at trial. And there doesn't have to be an argument over it. It can be used. Otherwise, the person has to give the foundation for the evidence. The judge has to say, I'd like to admit this. And the judge says, yes, you may admit it. So at this point, stipulated means, okay, we've agreed to it in advance and it could be to just about anything. But in this case, I think you're asking about evidence being stipulated. So that's what it means. They've agreed that it's admissible or to how it can be used, things like that. So S. Cipher wants to know, how could they say with his reaction that he was not involved? And I understand, excuse me, I understand your reaction, S. Cipher. I do understand. Karen wants to know, how did they manage to burn human flesh on the property without one of Chad's kids asking about the smell? And did they bury her and cover her? I don't know the details. What we heard was that it was I didn't see anything about hot coals. I just saw something for being buried with. I just saw that there was dirt. That's what I remembered about it. As far as the question about how they did it without Chad's children knowing, only one of them was living at the home at the time. And the rest, I think, had all moved out and were adults. One lived near Chad, obviously, catty corner, kitty corner. And I saw all the words in there. It's fascinating how many different ways that word is said. So I'm going to go through this later. I'm real curious what all the different ways were. But he lived close, but not, I mean, this was a 4-acre tract. So not necessarily enough to know something like that was occurring. Sherry wants to know, wasn't there a video where Chad said he always knew she was going to die young? It was a premonition he had. And Sherry's talking about, yes, there were people who heard Chad say, I don't know about video, but I know that there are people who will come to trial and who will testify that Chad said repeatedly that his wife, he had a premonition she was going to die young, she would be dying soon. And that obviously also raised the suspicion level of law enforcement. There's much, this is just one day's evidence. There are many more days to come. So there is a lot more evidence that we will hear about. But you are absolutely right. That's a critical piece for law enforcement, for the prosecution. And Adair is asking about the order of deaths and it's being a money trail. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me, Adair, but there were many deaths. So you are correct about that. Denise, why has Chad not been charged with Alex Cox's murder? And Alex Cox is the brother of Lori, and Alex Cox was deemed to die of natural causes. No one has been charged, not Lori, not Chad, not anybody has been charged with the death or murder of Alex Cox. It was considered natural causes, and as far as I know, no one is looking any further into it than that. There was, I believe, an autopsy, and there was no finding that there was some suspicious behavior that was behind the death of Alex Cox. Lots of people wonder about the timing of it. The night before, he told his wife, Zulema, that he hoped he wasn't the fall guy for Chad and Lori. Chad gave him a very detailed, lengthy blessing right before he died. So there were a lot of strange things around it, but no one was charged with that. Juju wants to know, did the prosecution state how they thought Tammy died? They believe it was asphyxiation or suffocating. We have not heard from the medical examiner yet, and I think we'll find out more about the autopsy. We haven't had specific testimony about that. We've had, I believe they introduced into evidence the autopsy, the coroner's report, or at least the certificate of death, but we haven't actually heard from the coroner yet who did the autopsy. Fun to Ski wants to know, why did the prosecutor team not object to law enforcement not being medical background? I'm not sure about your question, Fun to Ski. Maybe you could rephrase it. I'm not sure I understand. Anna Banana, will Lori have a role in this trial? I don't think so, other than the omnipresence of the co-conspirator, because she is charged with conspiring with Chad on all of these murders, and therefore we hear her name a lot, but I don't think she'll actually be present. I don't think she will actually testify. She's in Arizona, and as far as I know, there's no movement to bring her up or to ask her questions. I don't think I would assume she would take the fifth, even if they did. Dana Kavanaugh, do Chad's kids support him? As far as I know, they do. They all 5 went on 48 hours and answered questions and said that they supported their dad, and they did not believe he was guilty of the things he was charged of, and that they thought Lori had been a terrible influence, that she had been the person behind the deaths without the involvement of their dad. So as far as I know, they do. We did hear from John Pryor during the opening that 3 or 4 of the children will testify, not all 5. Now, somebody told me in the chat or comments that one of the reasons for that is at least one of the kids is away on a mission with the Mormon Church. So that may be why we're not going to hear from all 5. We're only going to hear from some. Okay, Marissa wants to know, do you think if Chad files for divorce from Lori, that will help his case? I think it's too late, and I don't know why that didn't happen. There may have been some reason. Maybe they thought the marital privilege was important. I don't know why they chose not to do that, or if maybe they just believed they should be married and they don't want to do that. I don't know the reason. Honestly, do I think it would help though? I don't think so. I just honestly don't, Marissa. Rabbit wants to know, did you hear how the defense lawyer was indignant that Tammy Daybell had been dug up? He did, when the kids were buried in dirt and had to be dug up. So I did hear how the defense lawyer, what he was doing was cross-examining, saying, you went out and dug up Tammy Daybell, and you did that without paying attention to all of the people who told you she had been sick, like her son and her daughter. They told you that. And instead of that, you just went out and dug her up. And I think it's a tactic that he's trying to use to say that you didn't pay attention. You had already prejudged what had occurred. You didn't wait to hear all the evidence. You didn't pay attention to what the Daybells were telling you. And I do think their strongest argument is probably that Tammy Daybell was not murdered. The kids were clearly murdered and they were in Chad's backyard. That's harder. We'll just see where it goes from here. But Roxy A, why is Pryor working alone on this case? Well, it's not by desire. He asked for help. They were unable to get someone who was death penalty certified to help him on the case. And there just were not enough lawyers who were death penalty certified. It requires being in a number of cases, and they just couldn't find somebody. They were willing to pay for it. The judge authorized it, but it was not forthcoming. They didn't get somebody else. So he sits alone at defense table. I cannot tell you how hard a job that is. So that's part of the reason why I think he's doing very well. But I do understand the point that was made earlier. Gene Philpott wants to know, don't you think that Chad's refusal to say where the kids were when he was with Lori is going to hurt him? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. That is going to definitely hurt. I assume his side is going to say the reason he didn't say where they were was he had no clue that they were buried in his backyard. He was, I don't know, inside using the vacuum cleaner while they were out there doing their stuff and burying the kids. I don't know what he was saying. Well, what he will say, but he apparently is going to say that he didn't know about it. I mean, I'm just guessing, and I don't know how exactly he's going to say that, because I don't think he's going to testify based on what I saw John Pryor doing today, what I said earlier. Kelly J, what happens if a juror falls asleep during court? I heard someone was nodding off. LOL, just curious. That happens. Let me tell you, Kelly J, that absolutely happens. Is that you'll sometimes get a juror, and if it becomes such a problem that they're missing, really truly missing the trial, the judge will usually call them in and say, you got to sleep more at night. You can't keep falling asleep. If they keep doing it, then usually what happens is one side or the other will say, we got to act, judge. We need to get this person off the jury because they aren't hearing the evidence, and therefore they can't make a valid decision on the case. And what happens is sometimes the judge will excuse them for that and say, okay, you're no longer a juror, and they'll move an alternate up. Now, in this case, I think they don't pit the alternates until the very end, but they would shrink the pool by one if that becomes a problem. It is often a problem. So somebody falling asleep one time, not an issue, but someone falling asleep regularly, that can be a real problem. And like I say, it does happen sometimes. Okay, looking for here we go. BM or Bormore Girl. I don't know. I'm butchering your name. I'm really sorry about that. Are you surprised he has his own laptop and sits so pompously in the court? Is he writing a new book, The Devils and the Details? I don't know. Good question. Maybe he'll write a book from prison. He'll probably have to disgorge the profits for that, but maybe he will continue to write. I'm not surprised that he has a laptop. I understood that he's had a laptop all along, but he hasn't had access to the internet. So it has the documents, the trial documents and things like that on it. So he could go through them and assist his attorney in preparing for the case. So I'm not surprised. They often give the person a computer so that they can access those documents. We saw Michelle Troconis had one. That did not go so well. And we are, of course, waiting for both her sentencing and also some finalization around the contempt charges she had for that. Caroline, do you find it odd that Lori called at the exact time that the cops show up? Do you think she saw it on the news that morning? I don't know. I don't know if she has that much access to the news. She seemed really happy when she called him, hey, babe, how you doing? It didn't seem like she was calling with purpose, but that whole conversation is frankly just a little weird, so it's hard to know. Tess wants to know, why are there preliminary hearings? It seems like they're a whole hearing in themselves. I need a whole trial. So there are definitely preliminary hearings. What you're getting right now is the whole trial. You're getting the for real thing. Here it is. It's a trial. But the reason for the preliminary hearings is to figure out what's the evidence that the jury's going to hear. I've got something worked up on Karen Reed for you. I'm kind of waiting for the judge to make some final rulings. One of the things that we're seeing in that case, and that we're seeing in all cases, it's just across the board. When the judge rules evidence in or out, that has an enormous impact on the case, because those facts might be the very ones that will persuade you one way or the other. And if the judge keeps them out and the jury doesn't hear them, it makes a significant impact on the case. So that's one of the things that I want to talk about with the Karen Reed case. And that's why there are preliminary hearings, is because of the fact that the judge needs to make those rulings outside the hearing of the jury and needs all the information in order to do that. Todd asks if there's a psychological profile of Chad. I don't know, but I sure would be interested to hear one. I doubt that. I don't think there would be anybody who would be permitted to do that, enough access to him to do that. So I'm thinking no, but it would be interesting. He never pled or suggested that he had any kind of mental disability that would prevent him from going to trial. Unlike Lori, who was repeatedly committed and then brought back out. Okay, now she's able to understand and is able to assist in her prosecution or in the defense of her case. That never happened with Chad. So Kelly J, do you find the way they are calling witnesses a little unorganized and hard to follow for the jury? I know what you're saying, Kelly. It's always a hard decision how you're going to call people, because one witness builds on the other. If you read a book report or a book, even a lot of times you'll get kind of a summary at the front, certainly some kind of report or paper. You'll get a summary at the front, and then you kind of know what to look for and what to expect. That's what opening statement is supposed to be. But when it comes to the witnesses, a lot of times they just do little pieces of it because the foundation hasn't been laid for some really critical piece of evidence. They got to call somebody else in. That person will lay the foundation, and then they recall the person, and that person is going to testify again. So it definitely can be difficult. It's done so that only evidence is used where the proper foundation has been laid and it's been admitted. That's why it ends up kind of messed up sometimes. Maha Ismail wants to know about, don't you think it's damning evidence, a text about the backyard? And I think that Maha is referring to the raccoon text. Extremely damning evidence, extremely problematic. And we haven't, I don't think anyway, we've heard that yet in this trial, but we're going to hear about the text from Chad Daybell to his wife, Tammy, that says, hey, just shooting a raccoon and buried it in the pet cemetery. And it just so happens to be the day after Tylee disappeared. So that is definitely going to be coming in, and we are going to hear a lot about that. Gail, what do you think of the conversation Chad and his daughter had in the police car? I thought it was strangely calm and also focused on some of the, I can understand a dad wanting to okay, let's get all the finances in order. I guess they didn't know it was being recorded. I mean, they gave passwords and all this kind of stuff, all of which have been changed by now, I'm sure, but they went into pretty great detail. It was striking to me that they seemed calm about everything. It seemed to me like finding a body in your backyard would be cause for hysteria. Maybe that's just me. It would cause me to be hysterical, but they seemed really calm about it. So maybe they just are made of sterner stuff than I am. Just my insights. Let's say Chad were to testify. they wouldn't be able to ask him about conversations with Lori, right? Since they're still married. There might be, that is a really good question because they are simultaneously co-conspirators and married. So those are kind of contradictory things. I don't know exactly what the final rule on that would be. If you're a co-conspirator, then your statements of co-conspirators are admitted, but any conversations between them would be under the marital privilege. So I'm not exactly sure, just my insights. I'm going to have to take a look at that. That is a very interesting question that I want to know the answer to. Eileen, do you think any of Chad's children will testify? I do. I think so because in his opening statement, John Pryor told us 3 or 4 of the 5 kids are going to testify. So they're apparently coming and will have things to say. They've been supportive of him. Okay, Robin wants to know, how can someone put in to win a membership? So this is what I think. I'm really bad at this, Robin. But at the bottom of your screen where you chat, there is a little dollar bill looking thing with a dollar sign. I think if you click on that, you can hit something that says enable gifts. And that enables you to receive a gifted membership. So that's what I think. That's my best explanation. Becca wants to know, do you think Chad talking to his daughter humanized him to the jury? I think it definitely could. Certainly his daughter's reaction to him did. She obviously didn't think he was guilty. She wasn't like, Dad, they found a body in the backyard. What's going on here? Tell me. None of that. She was like, well, they tell me they found a body in the backyard. You obviously were as surprised as I was. That was her reaction. And she said, I love you. And he said, I love you to her too. So I think without question, it would humanize him to some degree. Is it enough to make a difference? We'll have to wait and see. Okay, I've got somebody over here. Oh, thank you, Kay Oakley. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. So, look here. Mama Pinks has specific information on receiving gift memberships. Click the join button, top right-hand corner, click the 3 dots, click the gift settings, slide the button to turn on gifting, and YouTube selects them at random. So there you go. And you can play that back slowly if you're watching this later. Okay. So thank you, Mama Pinks. I really appreciate that. Michael Lalonde wants to know, can you please define the word exhumed? It means they were buried and you unbury them, you dig that grave back out and you pull the body out in order to do, in this case, an autopsy and to do some more work to determine exactly how the person died. Tess, why are there, asking again about the preliminary hearings. Penny, Wyatt, I answered that. Just scoot back a little bit and I answered your question. Penny, is anyone still wondering if he did something to her vehicle? He sent her on a road trip. I remember that about the road trip. He really insisted that she go visit, I believe it was her sister. No, you must go visit your sister. And I am assuming it was not because he did something to her vehicle, although interesting question. I hadn't even thought of that. That should definitely go into the, the novel that's written out, the fictional novel. But in this case, I thought he was just wanting to spend more time with Lori. That was just my theory, but that was in my head. I don't think there was any testimony about it. Okay, so Steffi B wants to know, have you seen the filing for the motions hearing they're doing at lunch tomorrow? Ooh, no, I like motions hearings. That's the nerd in me. So no, I haven't seen that. I'll have to look for that. I really appreciate one of the things Idaho does for these cases that are public and of great interest. They have cases of public interest section, a website, and they let you actually see all the documents easily. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you, Idaho. Scooter, what do you think of the prosecution's job today? I think they were munching through the evidence that they needed to munch through. I think John Pryor is doing a really good job too. This is a super hard case for John Pryor. So I'm always an apologist. I always think the lawyers are doing a great job. So very rarely do I come off that theme. I think it's just sympathy. I can kind of understand and relate. So I think that's why. Okay, we'll take like maybe 2 more questions. So Sherry, what about the text to Tammy from Chad about how he buried a raccoon? I think that's going to be important. We haven't heard it yet, at least not that I've heard. And I think it's going to be extremely important. So Fun to Ski is asking about John Pryor having a lien against Chad's house, or Chad signing over his part of the house to John Pryor. It is my understanding. I had initially thought that John Pryor literally owned the house, but as I understand it, he's a part owner in the house. I don't know who the other owners are. They might be, say, the children who received it from the estate of Tammy Daybell when she passed. I don't really know who they would be, but he owns at least a portion of it. I assume because Chad didn't have enough cash to pay for something like this. In fact, I can assure you that the house plus whatever cash Chad had is not enough to pay for as much as John Pryor has had to do to prepare for this. I mean, years. So, okay. Robin N., did Emma ever ask whose bodies were out there, or did she already have a good idea? I believe during that conversation she had, she says something about they told me it was JJ. It seems like I remember that there was some statement about it being JJ. I don't know. I assume she had met JJ. I'm pretty sure she had. Actually, come to think of it, I guess she would never have met JJ. She would not have met JJ. So, okay. Kitty Morris wants to know, did the raccoon come up? I didn't hear it today, but rest assured, that is coming. That is definitely coming. Okay. Susan D78, did any of Lori's family say that Alex was a little different or odd? Very good question. Very good question. And I hope we will be able to get an answer to that. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that he was considered odd. And Zulema seemed to think he was a really kind, nice person. That was his wife. But then, so I think there may be some more questions about Lori than Alex, but I would really like to know the answer, and I don't know the answer to that. Well, thank you all for watching. We will be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. At least I hope. You can scroll back to the beginning if you were curious why I'm saying I hope. Hubby is still in the hospital, so we will just have to see whether or not. But my intent is to go live every night at 7 p.m. and I'll let you know if that's not going to happen. So I will see you. Oh, I forgot. Thank you, Marlon and Mama Pinks, for your great job moderating. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And thank you so much to all the people for super stickers and super chats. Prosecution showed it to jury, and so you can get a pretty good look at it too. Red, blood-like substance on it. He said it was even wet and leaking everywhere. That was a quote. Zip ties, a razor blade. Why were these items there? And in the back window is a bobblehead of Alec Murdoch going back and forth.